tonight is an opportunity to talk about the Dhamma. It's something the Buddha encouraged us to do from time to time to help bring up more mindfulness and more understanding and wisdom. Because our life is marching on every day, every moment of every day. Time doesn't stand still, the world doesn't stand still. The Buddha compared a human life to a dewdrop, a drop of dew on a blade of grass in the morning. As soon as the sun comes up, then it starts to evaporate and then just disappears. Our life is like that. We're only here for a short time in the world, and it's up to us to make the best use of the time we have. And some people are experiencing stress and difficulty at this time with the changing conditions, having to stay at home more, not being able to participate in different activities that normally you would wish to participate or do. If you think about it, this period maybe of a few months, 6 months, whatever it is, where we have particular restrictions on our life and lifestyle, it's only a tiny hiccup in the whole scheme of things of one life. It's not very long at all. The trouble is when dukkha, stress and difficulties arise, and we tend to get caught up in the feeling and the experience of stress and forget the big picture, forget that fact that it's just one blip on the graph. It's just a tiny point in time, and when we do get stressed, that's all we can see, that's all we know and experience at that time. So the Buddha encouraged us to reflect a lot, bring up mindfulness and clear comprehension all the time to help bring our mind back to a place of clarity. You might say this is the heart of our practice, developing this quality of mindful awareness and then the reflective ability of the mind to reflect on our situation and understand it better. The opposite of that is we tend to follow our desires, moods, our attachment out of habit, out of unawareness. We tend to follow our moods and desires, and that brings us a lot of extra trouble, suffering in our life. So this is why, particularly at this time, it's a great opportunity to practice meditation more. If you're having time at home, find some time in your day, whether it's first thing in the morning, middle of the day, later in the evening, whenever you feel you have an opportunity, a time, set it aside to practice some formal meditation, sitting or even walking meditation, because this is the way we can raise the level of our consciousness, improve the quality of our awareness, and become more in touch with ourselves as a human being. Because normally, when I say normally, I mean say 6 months ago, our habits as human beings should always be going from one thing to another, one job, one activity to another, one entertainment to another, one experience to another. Our mind, when we're not training it very carefully, it tends to be always going out into the world through our senses, through our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, touch, and then just the thinking mind all the time. And that brings us a lot of confusion, misunderstanding, and not much peace. Whereas when we come to practice mindfulness, and particularly in formal meditation, but also just in daily life, it helps us to rein in, bring in this untamed mind that's wandering all over the place, following the moods and the attachments we have and getting involved with the world. It helps to bring it back to this body and mind in the present moment and bring it more under control when we practice mindfulness. And we say when you have the ability to bring up mindfulness, awareness, recollect yourself in the present moment, it's like being able to press the pause button on a video or a game or whatever it is you're involved with, whatever technology. If you have a pause button, you have that opportunity to stop, ponder things, reflect things, know things better. And the trouble is, a lot of our time we don't have this pause button working, so the life is just running all the time, and our mind is running with different emotions and thoughts and memories and feelings coming up all the time. And after a while that tends to become quite burdensome. Creates quite often a sort of tangled mess in our experience of this world. Tangled mess of thoughts, emotions coming up, often seemingly quite uncontrollable as well. So if we can learn to have a pause button, be able to bring up mindfulness, and doesn't mean to say we can't do anything or function as human beings, but if you have this pause button as you're engaging with the world, with the people around you in your home, with the jobs and the tasks you have to do, with your own body and how that is, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, strong or weak, tired or energetic, and so on. If you have this pause button, then you can stop, establish awareness, contemplate what's going on. And you see, that's very important when we're living in the family or in the workplace, but particularly at this time when we may be practicing staying at home. With our speech, with our actions, if you have mindfulness, you have this pause button. When things come up day to day, it helps you to stop and consider what is right, what is wrong, what is the good way to respond, what is useful, what is not useful. Otherwise we tend to always be reacting to things, and often not very mindfully and not very skillfully. So the quality of mindfulness, clear comprehension, is something that the Buddha says is always useful, always good to practice. And the way we do develop it as a skill is through meditation. And then from what we learn in our meditation, then we can apply that in daily life as well and improve this quality of just being aware of what's coming to us, what we're thinking, what we're saying, what we're doing. When we do reflect on our life, as just something that we're just here for a short period of time, then that brings up that sense of urgency and a sense of purpose. That why am I here, and what is the best way to use our time, use this life? And we often say the things we learn, the lessons we learn in life, the obstacles we go through, these are the most valuable things that will help us grow as human beings. And to learn from our experiences and the things that come up, we have to train our mind to look, to observe and reflect. And again, that's why we need the pause button of mindfulness, to be able to take a moment to observe what we're doing in our day from moment to moment, how we're interacting with others, how we're interacting with the world, what is coming up. You could say it's one of the most valuable qualities a human being can develop. And so when you're wishing yourself well, you want yourself to be a peaceful, happy human being, your life to be going in a good direction, or when you're considering your relationships to your partner, if you have one, your family, work colleagues, neighbours and so on. You want the best, you want to bring up good qualities, and so mindfulness is one of the most useful things you can bring up in your day, because it tends to nourish and lead on to other good qualities arising in your life. So one of the things when you're practicing mindfulness, you quickly become aware of the underlying nature of a human mind is when we have a sense of well-being, with the attitude of, say, goodwill to ourselves, goodwill to others, compassion towards ourselves, compassion to others, this brings a happiness, a peace to the heart. It's something we have to learn how to cultivate, and the practice of mindfulness helps to do that. As we're practicing mindfulness, where we can focus our mind on the quality of goodwill, compassion, in mindfully bringing up the reflection. And it's not simply just reciting some words, but it's a feeling, it's a positive emotion that we have to keep returning to. Like we just chanted the Buddha's words on loving kindness, and he compared the emotion of loving kindness or goodwill to the mother's love for her child. Because that's a very clear picture. When you have true love, then there's that sense of wishing the best and willing to sacrifice for oneself. When you have goodwill for yourself and goodwill for another person, you're willing to sacrifice for that person. And also the quality of compassion, which goes hand in hand with goodwill, loving kindness. It's that understanding or sensitivity to other people as well. Sometimes putting yourself in their shoes. And the more you develop these qualities mindfully, then the more you realize we're all in the same position as human beings. Having been born, we have to deal with the world. We have to face obstacles and difficulties and challenges. Just having a human body, having been born, you're immediately subject to aging and sickness, pain. Just sitting for a long time, walking for a long time, you get tired, you get pain. The more you become aware of that with goodwill and compassion in yourself, then the more you can see other people are just the same as you. This helps to improve our daily life, our relations, particularly in the home. Because when we get caught into our own stress and suffering, we're not that mindful, don't have much goodwill or compassion, then we tend to cut off. We become blind to other people's situation. We become more self-centered, and often that makes it worse. And a lot of our suffering does seem to be associated with other people. You live together with someone where you can't help but start noticing their habits, their ways of doing things, the way they talk, the way they spend their time. And if we're not careful by dwelling on other people too much without much awareness, we tend to find fault with them. And then when we are experiencing pain, suffering, difficulties ourselves, we often are looking for a scapegoat or someone to blame, and we attribute it to the people around us. So when you're consciously, mindfully bringing up goodwill, compassion, it's a good antidote to that habit. And we call it like the holy water of life. Like living in a monastery, people often come for blessings, and they ask for holy water to get sprinkled on them or to drink because they want a blessing, because they think that's going to help take their troubles away, improve their health, improve their mental health, and so on. But really the best holy water is the quality of kindness and compassion developed mindfully, consistently, regularly. And that really brings up something good in your mind, and it brings you qualities that will constantly bring back contentment, happiness to you and to the people around you. What we're really aiming for in our practice is to be able to develop kindness and compassion on a continual basis. So it's a bit like a spring. If you've ever been in the bush or the mountains, so right around here in the mountains we have a lot of springs where you just get water bubbling up from the ground all the time. It's just a natural spring occurring. Even when it hasn't been raining, even in a drought, some springs just keep bubbling up. That's what we're looking for when we say we're practicing goodwill, compassion with mindfulness. It's that ability to bring these qualities up all the time. like a spring bubbling up that keeps refreshing and nourishing, nurturing your own heart and mind, and then spreading that out to others. So this is something we can practice as a meditation and put into practice in our daily life. But it takes effort, and our real growth in life and success in life comes through the effort we put in. Not much comes to us very easily, or just not much falls into our lap. Sometimes we seem to get that windfalls and things go our way, but most of our success, most of our progress as human beings comes through our own efforts to raise the level of our consciousness, improve our minds. Like everything, so if you look at other people, everybody's the same in so many ways. We all have to learn to walk when we're kids, little babies. We learn to walk. No one's any different. And how do you learn to walk? Well, you learn by standing up, taking a few steps and then falling over, and then standing up, taking a few steps, falling over again. Often you have the encouragement of parents or people around you. You have examples, you have other people around you who walk and you want to do it like them. But the actual process of learning to walk has to come from one's own effort, putting effort into it until one can do it quite naturally. And the practice of loving kindness, compassion is just the same. And so you go in stops and starts. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's hard, but that's where you learn. And after a while it becomes more natural, more easy. And all aspects of meditation are like that. Any meditation technique you use to calm the mind, develop more awareness, develop samadhi, states of stillness and calm, comes like that, in stops and starts, and you have to learn how to keep going. And there's that famous simile Ajahn Chah used to talk about, somebody who wants to be successful in training their mind, training their heart. They have to learn how to keep going, keep learning from their experience, keep improving their experience, just like the guy who wants to get fire from fire sticks. You keep rubbing those two sticks together until you get heat and smoke. But if you stop every time your hands get tired, then all the heat is lost, the smoke goes, and you're back to square one. You have to learn how to keep going, and particularly at the time when you're tired. Keep going to the point where it's established, and then fire comes from the heat, the friction. And our practice is much the same. We have to learn how to keep going until we have our own internal source of goodwill, compassion bubbling up on a daily basis. One of the things that helps us to develop kindness and compassion on a daily basis is wisdom. Seeing the value of it and seeing what are the dangers to it and what are the supportive conditions to it. So we all know the danger of goodwill is it can easily form a sort of a clinging and attachment. So if you practice goodwill for yourself, you become too obsessed with yourself, always wanting things to go your own way. Wisdom has to balance that. We have to understand we don't always get what we want in life. Things don't always go our own way. Nobody wants to get old, but we get older every day. Nobody wants to get sick, but sometimes we get sick. So metta or goodwill isn't simply just getting what you want all the time, but it's having that goodwill to meet with these difficulties, and sometimes you get what you want, sometimes you don't. And the same with other people. You help other people, you have goodwill for other people, and sometimes they respond well, and sometimes they don't. And wisdom is that quality that stops you just becoming blind to the goodwill, the compassion you're practicing. Sometimes you have to reflect and accept that whatever you do to help someone, it won't necessarily give you quick results or the results you expect. You have to, and then sometimes you have to tailor your goodwill and compassion in an appropriate fashion for the situation. And that takes some wisdom and reflection. Sometimes we practice goodwill and we end up, clinging to that person, even clinging too tightly, too much to that person. So you help, to the point where you're obsessed with the person or over-attached. And they may even feel smothered, or you just can't stop thinking about them. So wisdom is that quality that helps you to reflect on what you're doing. Even when you're doing something good, you have to reflect whether there's any danger or obstacle coming up as you're doing it. But these two qualities are like the foundations for our life. Learning to live with ourselves, be at peace with ourselves, be tolerant of ourselves, our faults and weaknesses, and our good qualities, and then tolerant and kind to others, tolerant of their faults and weaknesses as well as their strengths and good qualities. If we have this as an underlying foundation for our life, then many other good things come out of it. So when you come to practice mindfulness, say, just like the kid learning to walk, if you're practicing and training yourself in mindfulness, the first thing you'll notice is, there are times when you're mindful and there's times when you're not very mindful. So when you're practicing meditation, whether it's on the breath or on the meditation on loving kindness, there'll be times when you're very mindful of the breath and stay with the breath and let go of all the distractions. And then there's times when you can't seem to do it at all, and your mind is all over the place. So we have to keep falling back to that goodwill and compassion, the understanding, so that we can put up with these challenges, the ups and downs, and not get too put off by them, too depressed by them. When you're practicing mindfulness of the quality of goodwill, metta, practicing regularly, one of the things you'll notice is when you don't have goodwill, because if you keep developing mindfulness on goodwill as a meditation object, anytime you don't have goodwill will become very clear to you, very obvious. You might feel disappointed or angry when you don't have goodwill. So when you get angry because you're angry. But it will highlight these times when you lose your goodwill. But even that, you have to turn around and take as something to learn from. You learn from those times when you lose your goodwill. And what can you learn? You can learn from the situations. Why do we lose our goodwill? And there may be different situations, different factors that contribute to it. Like when you become more physically tired, so you've been working all day or doing many things, it's easier to lose goodwill, become irritated, caught up in the physical feelings. Or when something goes wrong, whether it's something you're doing, something connected with other people, or just some situation you're in, something goes wrong, how easily we lose our goodwill. The more we're practicing this meditation, this awareness, the more you'll notice that. And so you have to develop a sort of balanced view of this and not be too critical of yourself, too harsh on yourself, but accept there are times when I lose my goodwill. And take it almost like as a challenge or a game even. How can I re-establish it? How can I let go of that anger or irritation? Ajahn Chah used to encourage people sometimes to become more mindful of their anger by having a jar with and collect some pebbles, and every time you notice yourself losing your goodwill, becoming angry in a situation, take one pebble and put it in the jar, just to make yourself more aware of how often you lose your temper, get caught into ill will. It makes you mindful in a very material way. Or there's that story of Upagupta, the monk who became the teacher of Asoka. His first teacher gave him a similar kind of practice. He said you have to take 2 sets of cloths some strips of white cloth and some strips of a dark coloured cloth. Keep them handy. And to become more aware of your mind, use these strips of cloth to become mindful of the state of mind. So every time you get caught into an unskillful state of mind, whether it's greed or anger or delusion, put down one of the darker pieces of cloth to make you clear, mindful that you've fallen into that state of mind. And every time you have a wholesome state of mind, so like metta and goodwill, or renunciation, or mindfulness, non-delusion, then you put down the white coloured cloth. And keep observing these pieces of cloth you're putting down through the day. How many are you getting? You know, at the beginning he had more dark pieces of cloth than white pieces of cloth because he was more mindful, becoming more mindful, and the first thing he was noticing was just how unskillful his mind was, always getting caught into different thoughts of greed or anger. But like a game, the challenge was to turn the numbers around. So be able to put down more white pieces of cloth, bring up more skillful thoughts over and over again, and acknowledge them by putting the white cloth down, and gradually become mindful enough to let go of the angry or unskillful thoughts, the greedy, selfish thoughts, and to even preempt them. Be more aware of situations that might prompt greed or anger, and actually be very mindful, very careful, so that you didn't fall into those negative states of mind. So gradually the pile of black-coloured pieces of cloth reduced to the point where he wasn't putting any down, and it was just white pieces of cloth every day put down. And then his practice went very well. His samadhi improved. His state of mind became more calm, more balanced, simply because he'd been training himself. Whatever method you do, that's our aim, is to bring up mindfulness and use it as a tool to train the mind, to bring up the more wholesome states of kindness and compassion, to abandon the more unwholesome, unskillful states of selfishness, greed, anger, hatred, and so on. And the better you become at this, well, like the kid who's learning to walk, the less the kid falls down, the more skilled he becomes at walking. The more skilled we become at bringing up mindfulness and looking after this mind, the better we can do it, and the more we can keep it out of trouble. In the beginning of our practice, we tend to always be attributing our suffering to external causes and conditions, to the coronavirus, the government, to our husband, to our wife, to our brother, our sister, whoever it is that seems to be annoying us or causing us trouble. In the beginning we tend to be like that, but the more you practice this mindfulness and bring up the goodwill every day, the more you might become aware that really the problem is arising inside our own hearts and minds. And you tend to become more aware that they're probably experiencing much the same sort of things. We each have our own burden to bear. We each have a body that gives us pain and discomfort. We each have problems to do with finding an income, getting a job, running a household, studying, learning the things we have to learn to live in the world. We all have to face those challenges. No one's any different. The more you practice with yourself and become aware of yourself, you realize other people are much the same. So instead of looking for these external scapegoats and people to blame, you start to look more internally and see what you can do to change your mind. One of the teachers of Ajahn Chah was a monk called Lumpur Ginari. And Lumpur Ginari, one of the ways he described the practice of meditation and becoming more mindful, more aware, is through using, using a rope, like a lasso. Normally our mind is going out to the world when we're not very mindful. We're thinking about this and that, and there's often not much wisdom guiding what we're thinking, not much awareness. So it's like we're throwing this big lasso out to the whole world, which is an impossible task anyway. And if you try and pull on the whole world, it won't move, and you just feel stuck, and you feel you can't really do anything or achieve anything. So he said you have to learn how to shorten this rope. Instead of throwing it out to the whole world, you start bringing it in towards yourself. And so say that at this time when you're practicing stay at home, social isolation, social distancing and so on, it's like they're even helping you to do this. You're reducing the amount of thoughts you have to think about, planning holidays, entertainments, work, going here, going there. It's like this rope is shortening all the time. They've helped you do half of it already. But the other half of it you have to do yourself. And that comes through the practice of mindfulness and clear comprehension. And every time you notice your mind wandering off with love and hate, getting distracted by the world, you bring your attention back to the mind and the body in the present moment by bringing that rope back to yourself. And it might at first seem to be many kilometers out, and then just 1 kilometer out, and then 500 meters out, and then 100 meters out, and then eventually maybe it's just like right in front of you, the end of this rope. You can see it where it is. It's not going anywhere at all. Your attention, your awareness is right with you. And if you can do that, what's it like? Well, it means you're more aware of your speech, your actions in the present moment. You're more aware of what thoughts, emotions are coming up in the present moment. And that has to come through practice, but it's something that's doable for us as human beings. It's not impossible. Lumpur Ginari was a very good example of this. He's someone who's very peaceful, very composed, mindful monk, very frugal, didn't want for much. He's a very good example in that way. And not only did he practice sitting meditation, but he also practiced a lot of walking meditation. And this is something, at home often you probably feel you can't do walking meditation, but he said you can walk, you have a space, even a small room with just a few meters wide. If you just got a few meters, you can still practice mindfulness of walking when you've got some free time. If you are finding sitting is difficult, your mind is restless or your body hurts in one way or another, you can practice walking meditation at home. In a room, walk between two corners or two walls of a room. Can walk very slowly. You don't have to do it speedily. You just very slowly walk back and forth, bringing mindfulness to the body, to the feeling of the feet touching the ground. You reach that wall, you turn, you walk back and forward. Or you can walk in your yard. There's a lot of stories these days about people doing different kinds of training in their backyard, running marathons in their yard or up and down a staircase, doing different exercises and sports. There's even that guy in the UK, 99 years old, Captain Tom, who's walked around his yard, around the house to raise funds for the National Health Service. There's all kinds of things you can do in these situations. And walking meditation is something that you can do even if you've only got 5 paces. Most of us can probably find more than that. It's another way to bring up mindfulness, to help yourself to be more in control of your own mind, more aware of your body and mind in the present moment. And it works very well with sitting meditation. If you do have time to meditate, often you might meditate for a period of time until you find you can't sit still for any longer because there's pain in the legs or the back. But you can maybe get up and do a similar amount of time of walking meditation. If you get in the habit of doing sitting and walking meditation once or twice or 3 times a day, whatever you've got, whatever time you've got, then you're constantly coming back to the body, the mind, how you feel, what you're thinking, being more aware of the intentions, the qualities of your state of mind, whether it's wholesome or unwholesome, over and over again, and not just in the sitting posture, but in the walking posture. And this will have an effect so that when you're maybe just walking around your house or walking from your house to the car, or you go out, if you are able to go out and you walk from your car to a shop or to the office, place of work, you can use those times as a time to practice walking meditation. Just bringing your attention back to the body and mind in the present moment and being more aware of the quality of your mind, whether it's wholesome or unwholesome. The more negative, unwholesome states of mind are to be abandoned once you recognize them. The skillful ones are to be cultivated, brought up and maintained. This is what we call right effort. Luang Por Ginari practiced this in many ways during, I think, the 1930s, a long time ago now. But he walked from Thailand to India barefoot. In those days you didn't need a passport, you just walked. And monks would walk into the forests out of Thailand, into Laos or Burma, and he walked all the way to India, thousands of kilometers. It took many, many years actually to walk all the way there and back. But he became very mindful of walking. And when you're practicing mindfulness of walking, what's it like? Well, sometimes your mind strays away from the feet, from the activity of walking. You get lost into a train of thought, or you're looking at something. It's like throwing that rope out again. When you realize, and you bring it back to the body, to the feet, to the present moment, and bringing that rope back in again. So he took several years to walk to India and back. So he obviously learned how to do that. Just keep his attention on the feet, walking to the point where the sense of this person, the burden of all their moods, of all their attachments, all the different problems and sufferings we have as human beings, all that would disappear. And it's just this being walking day in, day out. He walked often many hours a day. The sense of a person just disappeared, and he said it would just be walking, a body walking. No suffering, physically maybe still tiredness and pain, but no attachment to it. The mind was just peaceful and aware. And he learned that very well. And then eventually he came back, walked back to Thailand, settled down in his monastery, and later on Ajahn Chah came to study and practice with him. The walking meditation is an excellent additional way to practice loving kindness in the walking posture, practice mindfulness in the walking posture, or practice developing insight. What really frees our mind ultimately from suffering and cuts off the roots of our suffering is insight into the nature of this body and mind. Luang Por Ginari said you have to contemplate, see, this body is impermanent, it's constantly changing, it's brought together by many factors. From birth we've been eating and drinking and breathing, these keep the body going, but it's changing all the time, it's aging, and eventually it's going towards death. Developing awareness of that, seeing the impermanent nature of this body, seeing the impermanence of the mind, the thoughts that come and go, the feelings, the memories, the emotions. Making that insight really clear is what brightens the mind, makes the mind bigger than the normal things we're attached to. The mind, the spacious mind of samadhi, and then insight, the clarity, the brightness. That's what really frees the mind from suffering. When you see that this body and mind are impermanent, they're constantly changing, breaking up, arising and ceasing, and ultimately there's no self in this. We could say it's a process, different causal conditions, factors arising and ceasing all the time. And a mind that is peaceful and still and bright can see that, and it lets go of the greed, the anger, the delusion that comes when we attach to this body and mind as self and keep holding on and grasping to our experience with this sense of self. So if you keep practicing mindfulness, developing the loving kindness, the compassion, practicing mindfulness, clear comprehension, and training yourself to investigate the truth, well, what happens? Your mind becomes more still, more peaceful and brighter, happier within itself. And the Buddha said, Nati panya sama apa. And there's no bright light, there's no radiance as radiant as wisdom. Insight that sees the true nature of the way things are. The opposite of wisdom is delusion ignorance, attachment. That's when the mind goes dark, and we tend to get lost in that. But as we keep practicing mindfulness, every step through our walking meditation, every breath through our sitting meditation, every activity, every moment of the day, bringing up more mindfulness, reflecting on the truth, observing the truth, it's like the mind gradually brightens. And the brighter it becomes, the more peaceful it becomes. So maybe at this time you have a lot more time at home, but you also have the challenges of living with your family in a confined space maybe. You know, this is the way out of suffering. The way out is actually the way in. Going inwards into the mind, the body, becoming more mindful, paying attention more to yourself in the present moment, and recognizing, you know, those negative mind states when they come up and letting them go. You keep letting them go, well, they come up less. If you're not feeding them, they'll come up less. The mind becomes more settled in itself, brighter, happier, more peaceful, which has got to be a good thing for us and for other people. So tonight, maybe I'll just leave you with these words of encouragement, and we can talk again next time.